Good morning, all, and good morning to this beautiful late summer day from sunny and vibrant Vancouver, home of the Plastic Bank. And to every single participant and to everyone who's organized this webinar, I want to acknowledge all of you for stepping forward and being the change that the world is so desperate to see today. In all of my speeches around the world, asking every single audience, every single participant puts their hand up and says someone has to do something about what's unfolding in the environment. Someone has to do something about marine debris, plastic, and all else. And we can't help but to acknowledge every single participant because you've stood up to be the person that they all hope for. I think most importantly, what is going to be revealed to you during the seminar, that this is a place for all people who stand forward and put their hand up and say someone has to do something about it, that it gets to be them. Truly an interfaith model that connects and unites humanity and puts every single person in action, stewardship over creation. All faith exhibits the love of the earth. And I know that within the next few minutes, a powerful program is going to be revealed to you. Thank you for participating. Thank you for listening. But the real thanks comes from taking the moment at the end of the seminar to be in action. Nothing will change in the world if we don't all step forward for it. There are a few core values in the Plastic Bank, and I think most relevant is gather together, to be the conduit for change. It's not for the Plastic Bank to go and collect every piece of material, but to be an area, a place, a connection, a congregation of those who want to find others, to bring people into stewardship, to create a space for all people to be seen, for all life to be stewarded. At the end of the seminar, it's going to be truly up to you. It's really only you stepping forward, downloading the material, participating, that will create the change that you wanted when you enrolled. The Plastic Bank is many things. We've evolved tremendously. Not only we're a great chain of stores for the poor where you can deposit plastic garbage by mass and buy the things you need the most, school tuition, medical insurance, and access to health care or cooking fuel, or all those things that the world's poor need and can't afford. We're more like a chain of bank branches where you deposit plastic garbage by mass and withdraw cash, or through the digital wallet, buy the things that your family needs. And in this powerful model, this congregation, when every parishioner is encouraged to bring material to the parish, is truly what I'm most proud of. A truly exponential model that gathers the world's billions together to be in the service of the world's billions. But not just each other, all sentient life, every turtle, every fish, every whale is counting on all of us to be in the completion of this program. And I take a few moments to welcome you and tell you how proud and how honored I am that this webinar is unfolding. It's a life's dream to be in this place. And I recognize everyone who stood forward to create it. And I think even more importantly, I recognize you for being the person who's going to cause change. So from sunny Vancouver, humbly, I'm David, CEO and founder, thanking you for being in action and being that person that the world so desperately needs. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Ryan Thomas. I'm the founder and chairman of Cathio and a proud strategic advisor to Plastic Bank. I have the blessing of moderating this webinar, and I'm thankful that, again, we are joined by attendees from 5 continents and over 40 countries. I'm also proud to say that we have representatives who have signed up, attendees from many different religions, including various Christian denominations, Muslims, Hindus, Jainists, Buddhists, spiritualists, and non-believers have joined us this morning. So we're all here because on September 1st, we entered into what's called the season of creation. This is a tradition that culminates with the Day of Prayer for Creation on October 4th, the feast day of St. Francis of Assisi, the Catholic patron saint of ecology. Today, Plastic Bank is excited to join believers around the world to launch our Social Plastic Interfaith Rebellion. It's our urgent call to action for the healing of the ocean and empowering of poor communities. More than 4 years ago, Pope Francis released his encyclical Laudato Si on care for our common home. Both Catholics and non-Catholics alike have risen to the call to respond to God's invitation to better steward and care for the creation. One of these initiatives is Plastic Bank's Faith Stewardship Movement, which is dedicated to educating and forming people of faith to respond to God's call to steward all of creation. This morning, where I am in San Diego, California, I'm happy to share with all of our attendees the agenda. We'll begin with Dr. Robert Sluka, who will speak to us on the impact of plastic pollution on humans and wildlife. Then we have, in addition to Dr. Sluka, the blessing of having been joined from the Vatican, Dr. Father Jostrom, who is going to speak to us on the ethical and spiritual roots of the ecological crisis. We'll conclude with Dr. Peter Nitschke, who will speak to us on behalf of a Plastic Bank and share about the social plastic interfaith rebellion that Plastic Bank has started. They somehow have allowed me in here without a PhD. I think I'm the only one that will be speaking today without that. So let me introduce real quick Dr. Sluka. He leads AROCA's Marine and Coastal Conservation Program. He is a curious explorer, applying hopeful, optimistic, and holistic solutions to all that is ailing our oceans and the communities that rely on them. Dabbling in theology, he writes on the interface between Christian faith and marine conservation. He has worked cross-culturally, living for extended periods in Australia, India, Great Britain, and his native United States, where he currently resides in Florida. You can follow Dr. Bob on Twitter at Bob Sluka. He will be presenting the description of his presentation is the following. The ocean is vast and its beauty equally overwhelming. Focusing on his home in Florida, Bob uses the beauty and problems besetting this area to illuminate the major threats to the ocean globally. He will look in more detail at the impact of plastic pollution on humans and wildlife and open the discussion on how we might view the ocean in a new way, which sees ourselves as part of the community of creation, taking up our responsibility and privilege to serve the 71% of the planet covered by seawater. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Bob.
All right, great. Thank you. The presentation that I was asked to give was called "The State of the Ocean and the Challenge of Ocean Plastic." And as you can imagine, that's a very large topic. And so within 15 minutes, I'm not going to try to cover everything. In fact, because the ocean covers 71% of the planet, it's such a huge topic. And so what I would like to do is actually go to a very specific place that is actually my home beach, and here in Florida. And so what I want to do is introduce you a little bit to my patch of the world and the bits of the ocean that I'm learning to love and to care for. And through that, to share some of the things that are impacting the ocean globally. So this is Cape Canaveral National Seashore. Right now, four hurricanes on its way, hitting this weekend, but that's a whole other topic. But this area of the world has beautiful beaches here in Florida in America. And also very close by to these beaches is one of the most biodiverse lagoons in the world. So this is an estuary, considered part of the ocean, so it's partially saltwater. And the first thing I want to show is really just some of the beauty, especially in this estuary. You can use this kayak that I go out on, and I'm able to spend time really enjoying the beauty of the area. There's because this is an area where the temperate and subtropical zones meet, there's huge amount of biodiversity. In fact, it's the most biodiverse estuary in America. So you get species like this roseate spoonbill, beautiful bird in the mangroves there waiting. And if you were to continue out kayaking, we see some of this charismatic megafauna, these big manatees that are as large as the kayak. They'll come and they'll scrape against the kayak, and they seem to even want to interact with you. There's things like alligators as well. Again, sometimes as long as the boat that you're in. But these types of animals really help to sensitize us to the beauty of the natural world around us. And I think that's such a huge, important aspect of caring for the ocean, is learning to love it, learning to know your place, learning to know the species that live in the area where you're at. And these are some of the ones that you would readily recognize from our area. If we go to the beachfront, you'll see a very nice looking sandy beach, but in the background, some buildings. That's actually NASA and the Space Center. And so we have rocket launches from this area. So there's a real interesting dynamic between the technology and this future space-orientated world. And because of the need to protect this area from potential harm, they've created this national park and this national seashore where you can't see some of the development that I'll show you later. These areas are really important for many species and many habitats. One species which you may or may not be familiar with is the horseshoe crab. And this is an ancient animal that comes to nest on the shore of the estuary where we live. And of course, you would recognize these sea turtles. Florida is one of the most important sea turtle nesting areas in the world. So we have a bunch of important, really rare and endangered, in the case of sea turtles and even manatees, animals that make their home in this area. So recognizing this place as a place of beauty and importance. But it's also a place where we see all of the issues impacting our oceans today. Florida is a very attractive place for many people to move, and there's consistent development. This is the beaches just south of us, where they're not in a national park, and you can see the development right up to the beach line with just a small little dune in the area. And so there's huge amounts of pressure to build in these areas. One of the other global issues that, of course, is impacting Florida is climate change. This is a shot actually from Miami, a few hours south of us, and you can see the flooding of the pavement, the car wheels that are underwater. And so with rising sea levels, the shorelines of Florida and around the world are inundated, particularly at high tides. There are other issues with climate change, of course. We're all familiar with coral bleaching. That's also impacting southern areas of Florida. And so climate change is another major impact on our oceans. A huge issue is also pollution. In this case, what you see here in the upper right-hand corner is the coastline of Florida, and offshore are these green algae blooms. And these are caused by excess nutrients running into the water, both from agriculture, but also from all of that development. People move from areas where there are nice green lawns, and the socially accepted way of caring for your lawns is to put on fertilizers, to use pesticides to kill all the things and basically create a monocultural crop of a lawn that's deemed to be beauty. And so, of course, once it rains, all of this washes off into the water and creates algae blooms. And this is happening all over the world with coastal runoff. Deforestation, of course, is important in many areas. With the rain, there's nothing to hold the soil, and it runs off into the water. And particularly in the tropics, where it's a nutrient-poor environment, all these excess nutrients really cause a lot of problems here. And in the case of Florida, it's causing these major algae blooms. And this is where I think it's really important for us to think about faith issues, because it raises very important questions here about social norms, about societal issues of beauty, what we value. You know, do we value the ocean, the water, the species, and their health more than our beautiful lawns? And so, or at least how we define them as beautiful. So this is where I think faith has something really important to answer, to challenge people to think about issues like intrinsic value, that actually the species that live in these lagoons and habitats are just as important as our ideas of beauty. And so it allows us to have an important conversation on these issues. Florida is really important for its recreational fishing. This is a Goliath grouper that's been caught here in Florida. Interestingly, an endangered species. This is a much older photo, and it was put on the endangered species list, and so you couldn't catch it. And now they've come back. So we see conservation working when you release pressure from overfishing and create areas like marine protected areas, specific spaces where there's no fishing, or limit species like this. Their populations rebound. Now the question is, should they open up the fishery again? So overfishing, climate change, coastal development, coastal pollution. And of course, an important aspect of coastal pollution is plastic on our beaches and in our oceans. Interestingly, there's the International Coastal Cleanup coming up the third weekend in September. Of course, encourage you to get involved in that. One of the issues we have on our local beaches is actually there's not huge amounts of large plastic on our beaches here in Florida, or at least. And so sometimes we've gone out for cleanups and people have been somewhat disappointed, and it's an interesting feeling. Should you be disappointed that you went out to try to clean up and help and there's not that much to clean up? So it's been a good problem to have. However, when you look really, really close, as you can see in this photo, actually you find that there's tiny, tiny little pieces of plastic. And so all of these larger pieces of plastic, they break down into small microplastics. And these are very, very difficult to clean up off our beaches, and there really isn't a good mechanism for that right now. One of the primary sources of microplastics in the world are these small plastic pellets, affectionately known as nurdles. And you see a close-up here, and these are the basis for everything that's been made from plastic. So these are melted down and created into all the plastic. And so we're doing research here in Florida and other areas around the world as a Rasha into the sources and sinks of these plastic pellets, where they come from. They're almost like little sponges that absorb toxins. So we'll get into the challenge of plastic pollution in just a moment. But this is one of the areas in which we're conducting research and trying to understand the impacts of this on these environments. So even these seemingly clean beaches, you can go and look and you'll find microplastics there. And that's an important thing to understand about the impact we having on the ocean. So as we think specifically more about plastic pollution, there's just a few things that I want to highlight. Again, not being able to really go into huge amounts of detail, but to bring to your attention. The first is maybe a little different and comes from more of a theological point of view. This is my son holding a lizard that he caught in our back garden. And I think one of the challenges that plastic presents for us is that it is not a part of nature. It's something that we've created, and it doesn't fit into the normal recycling pattern that nature has. And in fact, I think one of the subtle things that plastic pollution does spiritually is it disconnects us from nature. It's something that's apart from nature. And so the theologian Richard Bauckham talks about this idea of the community of creation. We find in the scripture that with a creator God, that we are his creation. So we're together with nature. We're a part of nature. Nature isn't something else. It's us. And so plastic, I think, very subtly breaks some of those bonds between us and nature. And that's, I think, an important theological point. There's, of course, huge impacts of plastic pollution on people. We're finding major health effects where we've looked in our water, in our food. We're eating lots of plastic, and we don't really know what the impact of that is. There's still been very, very few studies. But we do know that plastics are absorbing toxins, and so it's highly likely that there's some sort of negative impact on us, but it's a human health concern. Also, there's huge amounts of evidence that being by the sea, in and around it, and on it, and under it is good for your health, good for your mind, good for your soul. And so again, this idea that my kids and my grandkids hopefully they'll never go to a beach where there's not plastic on that beach. And so this is affecting our issues of beauty. It affects how we relate to the ocean. And we don't know, there's still, again, research that needs to be done. How does that interrupt the benefits of the ocean on us when we go to an environment where we see all these plastic pollution there? So I think there's some real important ideas, again, to explore. And of course, we do know that the poor are particularly impacted by these plastic issues. And I won't go into that. I know Father Josh later and Peter and the work of Plastic Bank is really focusing on that. So I'll leave that to them. But it's a huge issue of how we love our neighbor. We also know that plastic pollution is not only affecting humans, but it's affecting wildlife, marine life. Of course, animals like sea turtles, sharks are getting caught in fishing nets. And so entanglement of animals in this plastic, and ghost fishing or fishing cages and nets that are left that on the bottom that continue to catch organisms. It's a hugely important issue for killing marine life. But it's not just the big things. The very bottom of the ocean, every species that we've looked at, every habitat we've looked at, there's plastic. And in the guts of every animal that we've looked at, it's there. And even in some seaweed, they've found it. So this is really an important issue, and its impact on marine life. The chemicals are potentially disrupting behavior and biology. So the challenge of plastic pollution is on humans, it's on wildlife, and particularly for us, and as we think about faith communities, and we need to explore and really understand how it's undermining our spirituality. So plastic presents a challenge to our way of life. This is my good friend, Dr. Benjamin Coburn. We were on an expedition to the Mediterranean, and he's down looking and trying to identify some species. And very few people get a chance to be under the water. You see a blue, just like a blue sheet out there if you're sitting on the beach, and you don't really know what's under it. And so I think the issue of plastic, and particularly with faiths, it's challenging us to a new type of relationship with the ocean, to think differently as being a part of that whole community of creation, of caring for ocean life, thinking of it as our neighbor. And so the real challenge, it's a challenge to our whole life, to deprioritize our own convenience, potentially to spend more money, to do things in a right way. And so I think that plastic really causes us to think, to reflect, and to really try to understand a new way of engaging with the ocean around us. So with that, I would finish and just encourage you to, you can see our website there and see more of the things that we're doing. And so thank you for the opportunity to speak with you and to share these things.
Thank you, Dr. Bob. Some very impressive pictures, incredible beauty and insight into how some of our activities are really causing change in the environment. And we're blessed to have with us also Father Josh. Father Josh is the coordinator of the sector of ecology and creation at the Vatican Dicastery for promoting integral human development. He is also chair of philosophy of science and director of the Institute of Social and Political Sciences at the Salesian Pontifical University in Rome. He has been particularly engaged with ecological issues, teaching courses at universities, conducting workshops for young people and other groups, and publishing in this area. His most recent books include Creation in Crisis, Science, Ethics, and Theology, Care for Our Common Home, The Philosophical Roots of the Ecological Crisis, and my personal favorite, his latest book, The 10 Green Commandments of Laudato Si. His presentation follows the three-tier see, judge, act method, followed by Pope Francis in the encyclical Laudato Si. He will begin with the description of the ecological crisis, including the plastic pollution as the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. Then he will go to unearth the underlying ethical and spiritual roots of the crisis. The last part of the presentation is dedicated to the response to this crisis in plastic pollution, in particular through a change of perception as well of lifestyles, calling us to act together and with greater urgency. Dr. Josh, thank you for joining us.
Okay, so good afternoon to all of you from Rome, from the Vatican. It's bright and sunny and gorgeous here in Rome. And I would like to congratulate the Plastic Bank and Ryan and Peter and Robbie and all of you for organizing this webinar, also to mark the season of creation, which we just began on the 1st of September. And the title is very interesting, that you have put Plastic Bank Interfaith Rebellion. And the season of creation reminds us that the earth we are living on is God's creation. And being a Catholic, being a Christian, being a priest, please allow me to begin with the very first verses of the book of Genesis that says that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and these beautiful words, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. The season of creation reminds us that earth is sacred. It's sacred because the Spirit of God was present right at the beginning, and the same Spirit continues to be present. Again, remaining at the dawn of creation, we see that after each day of creation, this phrase in the book of Genesis, the author saying, and God saw that it was good. And on the sixth day, of the narrative, of the myth of creation, on the last day, after all the living creatures, human beings have been created, the same expression is repeated, but even in a better way. God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. So creation is good. Creation is sacred. I would just like to make 2 points, also in the light of Pope Francis' encyclical Laudato Si, which follows this methodology of seeing, judging, and acting. So we said as introduction that creation is sacred, but the present state of our creation is a cause of concern because our common home appears to be crumbling around us. And this is a study which came out already in 2009, imagine 10 years ago, entitled The Planetary Boundaries. Because I would like to emphasize this plastic pollution, biodiversity loss, all these are connected. And in this study, the scientists identified 9 basic areas. And already in 2009, in 3, we had gone beyond the safety zone, seen as green at the center of this graph. And climate change significantly at the Vatican. Pope Francis, since many months, uses the word climate crisis. And the meeting that he had with the CEOs of oil companies in the month of June used the expression that we are living in a climate emergency. So it's no more climate change, it's climate crisis, climate emergency. And also the other problems, biodiversity loss, the nitrogen cycle. The next slide, I would like to speak of the tipping points. Now, why are we worried? Especially the scientific community is worried? It's because on some issues, if you go beyond certain thresholds, we cannot come back. Now, scientists have identified many of these tipping points. Let me just pick up 3. Probably the one which causes most concern is that the Arctic is melting, the Greenland. Now, we know that if the Greenland, and it's already melting, if the entire Greenland were to melt, sea levels will rise by 7 meters. And Bob began with the slides of the beautiful beaches. And most of humanity lives on the coast. Most of our cities, be it Jakarta or Mumbai or Amsterdam or Florida, they're all on the city, on the coast. So, and Greenland is now melting 4 times faster than what we expected. A second tipping point is the Amazon rainforest. Sadly, the Amazon rainforest is burning. We have lost lots of hectares of forest. Now, last year, scientists told us that there is already 25% of deforestation of the Amazon. And if you are to go beyond 40% of deforestation, the entire Amazon can die out. It can just become a savanna. And we know that the Amazon conditions not just the microclimate, but the entire macroclimate of the planet. And with the recent fires, we are like coming closer towards that tipping point for the Amazon. And the third tipping point to which I would like to call your attention is the Indian summer monsoon, because I was there just 10 days ago, and we had floods. A year ago, we had the worst floods in history, and over 500 people died in the state of Kerala, for example. And this year, around just before the 15th of August, last year it happened after the 15th of August. This year, again, we had floods and over 100 people died. And we thought, like when we studied, I remember as a student studying these things 15, 20 years ago. And they said these tipping points, like the Indian monsoons, it could shift, say, in the second half of the century. But things are already happening. So we are in a very critical stage. And with that, I would really like to come to our theme of this webinar, the plastic pollution. I know Bob will come back with this. I listened to him some time ago. So I can guarantee it's going to be a beautiful presentation from him about the plastic pollution. And this is the situation of our home planet. Most of you probably know this data, this warning again for the scientific community, telling us that if we go on like this by the middle of the century, by 2050, we're already in 2019, we will have more plastic than fish in our oceans. And most of this, 70-80% of the plastic comes from the land. It comes from us. And that's why Pope Francis says in Laudato Si, the earth, our home, earth is not just environment, it's our common home, is beginning to look more and more like an immense pile of filth. I began the presentation speaking of the book of Genesis, when God saw that everything was good, after everything was created in the power of the Spirit of God. And we are turning this earth into an immense pile of filth. And the Pope Francis warns us that we may, if we go on like this, we may well be leaving to coming generations debris, desolation, and filth. And this, this is one of the most beautiful quotations that I've read in Laudato Si, but because some sort of keeps ringing in our ears. Pope Francis asking us, what kind of world do we want to leave to those who come after us, to children who are now growing up? And the sad thing is, I emphasized the climate crisis, and the latest report last October from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says that to remain within the threshold of 1.5 degrees centigrade, climate, the average temperature has already increased by 1.1 degrees centigrade from 1850, and that's the cause of the extreme weather events we are living with. Bob, I was feeling so sorry about the hurricane, and that's all, the impact of 1.5 degree increase. And imagine if we go beyond 1.5 degrees centigrade, it's going to be catastrophic. Now, just to avoid that situation, we have something like 12 years according to the scientific community. So it is a very urgent issue, probably the most important challenge we are facing as humanity. So the first part was seeing the situation. Our common home has become an immense pile of filth, plastic, and all other forms of pollution. Now, let's take a second moment, a moment to judge. How did we get here? And the basic reason is that, let me follow the analysis done by Pope Francis in Laudato Si. He tells us that to get to the deeper human roots of the ecological crisis, that's chapter 3, those of you are familiar with the Laudato Si, chapter 3 of the encyclical, Pope Francis tells us that we need to get to the underlying conceptual foundations of the reigning dominant technocratic economic paradigm. The problem is we don't see the earth as sacred, as creation anymore. For us, earth has been reduced to real estate, a storehouse of resources, and we can use and abuse, buy and throw, and earth has been reduced to that. And it's all mainly because we have a false concept of economic development, whereas real economics is oikos nomos. It's about managing our common home. There is no contradiction between economics and ecology. Ecology is the science. It's a study about our common home, this beautiful word in Greek, oikos. And economy has the same root. It's oikos nomos, how to manage, how to govern our common home. And I spoke about the Amazon rainforest. And all this is the result of a false model of economic development, because the refrain we hear from President Bolsonaro and others is that we need to develop, Amazon has to develop, but then what type of development? If in developing we are causing the death of indigenous communities who are living there, if we are killing the very lungs of the planet, that is not development. We are destroying our own home, our own common home. Again, the Amazon rainforest fires. And let me take a deeper level. So one problem is the false economic model we are developing. But going deeper from the faith perspective, we are having an interfaith webinar. We realize that at the deepest level, the ecological crisis is a profoundly spiritual and religious crisis. These beautiful words from Pope Francis, right at the beginning of Laudato Si, paragraph 2, he tells us that the violence present in our hearts, wounded by sin, is also reflected in the symptoms of sickness evident in the soil, in the water. So we have plastic pollution in our waters. It's because it's a reflection of the disharmony of the pollution within us. So it is at the deepest level a moral crisis. And those of you are familiar with the Bible, this is an image, of Cain killing his own brother Abel. That is chapter 3 of the book of Genesis. Now, significantly, biblical scholars tell us when God asks Cain, after he has killed his own brother, the first fratricide in biblical history, God asks Cain, Cain, where is your brother? And Cain replies, am I the keeper of my brother? And biblical scholars tell us the word keeper, the verb keeping, is the same one that God used in the second chapter of Genesis, Genesis 2:15, when God told Adam and Eve to keep this garden. And so we are not keeping the cosmic garden of our common home. We are not keeping our own brothers and sisters. We have forgotten the Eucharistic vocation. The true oikonomia reflects the Eucharistic vocation and Eucharistic sharing. We sit around the same table. There are no distinctions. All are equal. It's a family atmosphere. We sit around the same family table, namely to share, it's a beautiful word, share the gifts of creation with all the members of our common household in a spirit of communion, not competition, communion, because we are a common human family living in a common home. Like the one bread, that's the Eucharistic image, broken and shared at the table of the Lord. And the earth is indeed humankind's common table laid by God for all. Around that table we gather in a spirit of conviviality, not in competitive scramble, that's the paradigm of the neoliberal economic paradigm, but in joyful fellowship. Beautiful words, nurturing and sheltering one another. And this is an image with children on the street, just a reflection of our society today. Over 815 million people who still cannot afford a full meal a day, So we have forgotten that earth is for everyone, that it is to be shared. So it is a moral crisis that we are living in, spiritual and moral crisis. And a third point is, again taking deeper, that we have forgotten that creation is God's first and primordial revelation. God has written, according to the early fathers of the church, two books, the book of works, that is creation, and the book of words, that's the Bible. And we have forgotten that God's first and primordial revelation is creation, where every creature, every plant, every tree, every flower speaks to us of God. That's why creation is indeed the very first epiphany of God. And a fourth point is that we have forgotten that caring for our common home is our original vocation. That's what I mentioned before, Genesis 2:15, when Adam and Eve were created and they were placed in the Garden of Eden. They were asked to take care of this garden. And in fact, significantly, that is the very first commandment that humanity has been given in the Bible. What I would like to call our first job description. Humanity has been created, has been gifted this beautiful planet, not to use and abuse it, but to take care of it. That is our job. That is our job description. This is an image of the creation narrative. And so we have seeing the precarious state of our common home, judging. We are following a false economic paradigm, and we have forgotten that earth is God's creation, that it is God's revelation, that it is entrusted to our stewardship. Now, in this situation, how do we respond from an interfaith perspective? First of all, Pope Francis reminds us that Christians have not always appropriated and developed the spiritual treasures bestowed by God upon the church, where the life of the Spirit is not dissociated from the body or from nature or from worldly realities, but lived in and with them, in communion with all that surrounds us. So we need to acknowledge this, our failure, and undergo what we call an ecological conversion. Now, which, according to me, has to be at two levels. First level, we need to change the way we perceive, look at the natural world. We need to recover what Laudato Si mentions, chapter 2, the last section, the gaze of Jesus on creation, how Jesus looked at creation, this contemplative view of creation, seeing God. And if I might quote here, the beautiful example of Saint Francis of Assisi. Francis of Assisi would see a little bird and start singing, or a flower and go into ecstasy, because that element, or now we could speak of a beautiful beach or ocean or whatever, and because that connected him with the Creator. So we need to recover this contemplative view of creation. And because for this we need a change of heart, a profound interior conversion. And the second part is, all this has to be reflected in radical lifestyle changes. Working at the Vatican, we are realizing that we need to speak on these issues, create awareness, but unless and until we change our lifestyles, we are not really going to respond to these problems. So if there is plastic pollution, it's because, I said, it all comes from us, it's caused by us. These are the products that we use. Do I take a decision to avoid plastic? Now, I said I work at the Vatican. One thing we managed to do, it's more than a year now, we said we are not going to use plastic bottles anymore. So we don't use plastic anymore in our dicastery, in our ministry at the Vatican. And probably some of you have heard that it has been decided that from the 1st of January next year, Vatican won't use single-use plastic. So this is a very courageous decision. Like that, a number of things. I can tell you personally, since several years, like I don't use shampoo or shower lotion in plastic containers. I just use soap wrapped up in paper. The simple example. And also allow me to, I was feeling very passionate about the Amazon. And I know now, I'm not alone. Many people, after the fire started the Amazon, they said, we are not going to eat beef anymore, or we are going to cut down our consumption of meat, because most of the Amazon, the forests are being cleared to rear the cattle. It's to satisfy our appetite for meat. So somewhat we need a radical decision, change of lifestyle. I'm not saying please don't give up meat. But we can cut down when it's possible. Like that, each one can find. We can avoid maybe using too often our cars. So I use, last 15 years, I use public transport in Rome. So I just want, but the point I want to make is we need to change radical lifestyle changes. And because we are living in an emergency, those words of Pope Francis, what world are we living for future generations? And the next 10, 12 years are crucial. It's the period in which we can heal and rebuild our common home, or we can carry on destroying it. And so this is an emergency. In an emergency, we need to respond with all our resources. And my very last slide, why I appreciate so much of the contribution of the Plastic Bank, because they have realized that it is spiritual, and I also mentioned it's a moral crisis. So the solution also has to be, response has to be spiritual and religious, and also moral. I was very happy to learn that the Plastic Bank believes the empowerment of poor communities. And in the Christian tradition, we encounter God in the poor. St. Francis of Assisi, Mother Teresa of Calcutta in our own days, and so many of our Christian brothers and sisters, not only our religion, also in other religions, that when we care for the poor, we are truly becoming religious. And this beautiful initiative, I don't know, most of you have familiar with it, which the Plastic Bank does, is to create, among other things, rosaries, holy rosaries from the plastic waste collected from the, that's a sign of hope. The same symbol of distraction can become a symbol of hope, a symbol of spirituality, religiosity. And I don't know, Ryan would be angry if I were to mention it here, that we have an agreement that, or an invitation we are trying to work on, that at the public events that the Vatican will be hosting from 2020 and onwards, we will try to distribute plastic rosaries to all those who are taking part in those events. So, and I really want to conclude on this note that God is with us, that recovering our moral, spiritual, religious roots, we can overcome this problem. And thank you once again for this opportunity to address you all. And thank you for the great, I know all the participants who are listening. You are all actors, protagonists in the field. And thank you very much for your contribution. I send you best wishes and prayers, also in the name of Pope Francis here at the Vatican. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Thank you, Father. Looks like I've got the echo right now, so I won't speak too much. Next up, we'll have Dr. Peter Nitschke, who leads the interfaith program at Plastic Bank. So unfortunately, because I have this echo, Peter, I'm just going to transition it off you and let you give a little introduction of yourself and the presentation.
Hello, everybody. I hope I don't have an echo and you can hear me well. Greetings from Germany. I'm Peter from the Plastic Bank. I'm the Plastic Bank interface specialist, and for the last year we started to work with different faith communities to start this program. And I also started the Plastic Bank in the Philippines. I pioneered the Plastic Bank there from 2017 to 2018. And now I relocated back to Germany, and now I have the opportunity leading this wonderful program and engaging faith communities with the Plastic Bank. And so we call it the Interfaith Stewardship Rebellion because we don't want to accept the status quo. We want something significant to change, and rebellion is always a movement of many people. So it's not something we can do alone. We need many people to join this rebellion so we can make a difference. And it's all about plastic, and all of us use plastic every day. And in many ways, it's a very practical material, but the problem is when it becomes waste. If what Pastor Josh said, in nature, there is no waste. Everything is being used. So waste is something that's not part of God's economy. So we need to manage waste, and we are not doing that. And that's why we have this big problem of lots of plastic in the ocean, in the environment. And if we continue like this, as Father Josh said, in just 30 years, we'll have more plastic volume in the ocean than fish. And this must not happen. We can do something now to change it, and let's do it. So plastic is really threatening our life. It's making a big impact. It's creating a big disaster on life in the ocean. It's degenerating into microplastic. It's going into the food chain. We have plastic in our bodies, each one of us. And this plastic will be still there when we are dead, because it takes hundreds of years to really disappear. On the other hand, we talked about the poor. And who are the poor? Those are the informal waste pickers in the slums in the third world countries who just make a living by collecting scrap, and they just live day by day. They're unprotected by the law. They are marginalized. And there are millions of them. And these people are environmentalists. They clean up our planet, but they barely survive. So that's not really fair, right? We should do something for them. They should be living a life in dignity and with stable income and with hope and opportunities. So the Plastic Bank had this audacious vision to stop ocean plastic, to turn off the tap. It won't help cleaning up the ocean while 8 million tons of plastic going into the ocean every year. The first thing we need to do is stop throwing plastic into the ocean. And the way we do it, we are out to mobilize 1 billion people and to monetize waste and improving lives. So we reveal the value of plastic by saying plastic is not waste, it has value. It is not only raw material for the economy to create new products, it's also raw material to change lives in empowering communities, turning pollution into wealth. So in our partner communities, plastic is an avenue for stable income, but also for many other needs like healthcare, school tuition, fresh food, clean water. And people can have access to those by collecting waste. And this will lead them for a life for dignity and give them realistic hope for a better future and transformation. Because like when you can send your children to school, the next generation will have a hope for a better life, because with an education, the children can get jobs and can move up. So how are we doing this? We build collection points in places where poverty and ocean plastic are rampant. Then we provide incentives for people in exchange for plastic. Then these incentives encourage people to collect more plastic and manage it better. Then the industry partners that work with us use it as social plastic, which is sort of fair trade plastic because it empowers the poor. Then the loop is closed, plastic is manufactured into new products, and such plastic is too valuable to be thrown away. Now, the question is, what has this to do with faith? Plastic Bank is not a faith-based group, it is a social enterprise. But as Father Josh has already explained, faith is about caring for creation. It is about caring for the poor. So you see the alignment with the mission of the Plastic Bank. So congregations can help prevent ocean plastic and sustainably redistribute the wealth to the most disenfranchised. The same is, everybody is using plastic, also people of faith. It's what unites all religion and unites humanity is the use of plastic. So we all have a responsibility for the plastic that we use, right? So we have developed two programs. One is for a congregation in the Global South, where we set up collection points and change local communities. And in the Global North, it's about neutralizing your plastic footprint. And we bring those two together by building partnerships between congregations in the Global South and Global North. So once again, how does it work for a congregation in the Global South? It's setting up a collection point using our Plastic Bank tools. It's mobilizing the community to already segregate their plastic at home, bring it to the collection point, and the revenue is used by the congregation to serve their community. Like we have church communities in Indonesia who are doing that, and the revenue they make from the plastic goes into a social fund. So if there are poor members in the community that cannot pay their medical bills, the church is using that income from the plastic to support those needy members. In the global north, it's about neutralizing your plastic footprint. It is about assessing how much plastic do we actually consume. And then it's about reducing the plastic footprint, looking which plastic don't we need to use, like just what the Vatican is doing right now, eliminating all single-use plastic. And I think that's a great example that's starting in the Vatican, and every congregation should do it. So the 3R principle, reduce, reuse, and recycle. This is what all should be doing, and then we could significantly cut down on our plastic. But then the other plastic that we are still using, it can be neutralized, and the financial support created through this plastic bank will use to support congregations in the south, setting up recycling infrastructure, because we have to see that ocean plastic comes mostly from 4 different countries, and if we can stop it there, we will make the big cut there. But it needs congregation from the global south and the global north working together to make this difference. How does Plastic Bank support congregations that are joining the program? So in the last year, we have created homilies, we have created youth curricula, we have created toolkits on how to do it. And within this month, we are launching an online learning platform where we have training videos where congregations can go through these training videos, they can download the material, and then they can just start going ahead. We also have promotional material like flyers and posters that will be available soon. We are here to support you. If you have any inquiries, you can just email us and we try to help you. And in countries where we have programs like the Philippines, Indonesia, Brazil, Haiti, our teams are willing to come to your church, and they're willing to help you to get going. So our goal is to be an enabler for congregations, to put the faith into action, to stop ocean plastic and empower poor communities, and see that as a service to God, to see that as this is part of our spiritual journey. So it's not something we just have to do. It is something that we are called to do, because we are called to be salt and light in our world, which means we are supposed to be part of the solution and not of the pollution. So, and I hope that you all will join us. We will inform you as soon as our online platform is ready, and then you could start, because the Bible also says we should not only be listeners, we should also be doers. And that is my invitation to all of you. Thank you very much for giving your time to listening to me. It has been a great pleasure and privilege to be able to share to you, and may God bless you.
Thank you so much, Peter. It looks like I still have a little bit of an echo here. So Peter, would you mind moderating just so people can hear well and are not bothered by my echo? Maybe
Yes,
we can take some questions and answers.
This is Dorothea. Yes, you are right, Dorothea. This is not really ocean plastic that we are collecting. Of course, some of the plastic, we do beach cleanups. So some of the plastic is on the beaches that comes from the sea that's washed on shore. So there is some part is ocean plastic. but our battle cry is really turning off the tap on ocean plastics, stopping plastic to go into the ocean. So we need to improve the plastic recovery on land. That is now, from our point of view, the wisest way forward. Are we online? A Plastic Bank is online. It's just our training platform for faith-based communities that is not yet online. And we will inform you as soon as it is online. But our website is www.plasticbank.com. So you can check our website. Actually, after this webinar, when you log out, you will be led to our website. Technical answer here: cleaning and purifying of beads, pricing only that they are suitable for quality recycling. That will depend on the plastic. No, we have an action kit on how to collect plastic. So it's true, if plastic is too long in the sun, if it's too bleached, it will be difficult to recycle. It will depend on our staff to check what kind of plastic can be recycled or not. Yeah, Ryan has just put in the link to our website. Yes, that is true. Robert just said a lot of plastic, particularly on islands like Haiti, that is on the land, could likely end up in the ocean if not collected properly. That is true. Actually, in Florida, where Robert lives, plastic from Haiti is washed at the beaches. What happened to the rejected plastic, Mark, is saying that will depend on the country, most likely going into landfill. I think if it can't be recycled, there are also and what we have to work with the industry. There is a lot of plastic packaging that's difficult to recycle. The plastic industry has to produce packaging that can all be recycled. That needs to be our advocacy, because the more they mix into the plastic, like colors, stabilizers, prints, the more difficult it is to recycle. So here is what Rob said: we work in areas in 50 miles of the ocean, which is the source of most ocean plastic. Yes, that is. Okay, there is Monica. It might go to landfills here in Switzerland. It's burned to reduce volume and generate energy. Yes, that is true. We're also working with some companies who do pyrolysis. They can do, because plastic is made out of crude oil, and then they can make the plastic back into crude oil, but that uses some energy. So where are there recycling plants in the countries where you already operate or somewhere else? Okay, the recycling plants are mostly in the countries we are working with local recyclers who crash and palletize the plastic. Okay, here's Carmen. How the church will position itself regard to population control, as the planet does not support faster population growth anymore. I think that is a very important question, but I'm sorry, Carmen, but it's probably beyond this seminar to answer these questions. Here's another connection from Plastic Bank. We develop infrastructure for recycling within local countries. We partner with local processors. Exactly. You have technical challenges with sound, Emmanuel. Okay. The mail contact. Yes, that is interface@plasticbank.com. I just type it in. Okay, where you can reach us. Yes, Monica, raising awareness is really very important. When we tested our Bible study material for cell groups, I tested it in my home group. We had very important, very long discussions, and people got really engaged with it. It really shows there is a gap in our spiritual discussions, that this discussion has been ignored or absent, and we have to bring it into our churches. We have to show that our faith can be very relevant today by addressing issues like this. Okay, I almost cannot. What are the ways faith communities in the global north can be involved in the Plastic Bank goals? We have made a separate booklet for this on how to do it. The main thing is raising awareness of your own plastic footprint, reducing it, and also neutralizing the plastic that you have, so we can build plastic recycling infrastructure in the global south. Okay, here's another question. In our hope to reduce our use and production of plastic, the manufacturers would be affected, which means even the workers in those companies or factories would be affected, right? Some of these are most probably people who are not even given a living wage. How are we able to serve those jobs may be affected? Yeah, that is a very good question. Because there are people's jobs on the line. In the moment, I have to say, Sarah, plastic production is increasing significantly, and a lot of those plastic production lines are operating through machines. Actually, they are semi-automatic, and I think we don't need to worry so much about this right now, because plastic production is skyrocketing. So reducing means probably we can just maybe freeze it at where we are at. Okay, I think we leave it from now. By now, we thank you very much. We have gone over time a bit, and we'll keep in touch with all of you. Please check out our website. Check out our Facebook. We have an interfaith plastic bank group where we post what's happening in our interfaith plastic bank rebellion, where you also can interact with your ideas and suggestions. And this is now the beginning of a new work that you're doing, and we hope you will work alongside us. Actually, we need you to make this work. We need you to make a difference for the planet together. And we thank you for the time you've given. We hope we were able to inspire you, to challenge you, to engage you, and we are looking forward to keep in touch with you. Thank you very much to everybody, and hope to see you soon.